So before we get started and talking about Dear White People and about the cinematography and kind of the process behind all of that, I wanted to just kind of get a little bit from you about kind of how you got started, what kind of got you into cinematography in the first place, and kind of your trajectory in summary.
Sure, I'll try to keep it brief because it's a very strange and bumpy road. But basically, as a kid, I was always really inspired by animation, and as I started to grow, I was really into just drawing, hand-drawn animation, creating flip books, all that kind of stuff. And as that developed, I basically joined this like animation society for some, it's, kind of an adult animation society when we were living in Calgary. We moved around a lot. This is a very brief summation with a lot of a lot more questions behind it, I'm sure. But there I was introduced to a 16mm camera. Of course, this is the film days, and I sort of fell in love with this sort of magic device that could turn these paintings into moving art. And I just loved the ability to compose with color and create everything in that frame, have sort of total control over a moving image was sort of the initial fascination. And as I grew up, that sort of translated a bit to more, we had a camcorder at home, so we were always making movies. My sister was the actress, of course. I was fascinated with, a lot of trick shots and sort of the magic of kind of the animation version of live action sort of got me into it. Then I started having a bit more of a fascination with still photography, film still photography, and sort of the opposite side, the other side of the brain in some ways, which was seeing real life play out and find an interesting angle on it rather than having full control of where literally everything was and what it looks like. And I think that sort of combination was something that followed me throughout. I ended up becoming pretty steeped in the documentary side and the narrative side, and they kind of fuse in my work. From there, I did everything in my power to seek out independent film, which was burgeoning sort of in the late 90s. In the DC area, there was, I would spend my time as a grip or electric as a high schooler for free on my weekends. Learned a lot from a sort of a mentorship from a DP there, and really great filmmakers in the area. Studied my ass off to go to film school, got into USC and had a really great undergrad experience where I was lucky to be one of few wannabe cinematographers in undergrad there. There were a lot of really talented and driven directors, producers, screenwriters. So that meant a lot of projects to shoot. It was still the film days, and there was a lot of access to gear and film, and was able to put together a reel good enough to get into AFI, which I went straight to as the youngest person in that class. Very intimidated by my fellow students who were like Emmy winners and stuff like that. Learned a hell of a lot from them. Tried my hand sort of on the camera side of crewing, found I was more interested in the lighting side of crewing if that was going to be something I had to do for money, which it was. And then I also sort of admitted that I'd rather make little to no money shooting stuff than pulling focus or sort of working the way up the loader camera side of stuff. Gaffing a ton for friends, camera operating for friends on projects, piecing together features over the years from $50,000 budgets eventually to $1 million budgets. And just sort of at the, towards the 10th feature or so, made a connection that ended up getting a pilot. I did the pilot, didn't go anywhere. A year later, that production company and director called me. We did another pilot that got picked up. And then suddenly I was a viable episodic DP. And I was able to sort of apply to shows like Dear White People, and amazingly got it. This was only maybe the second or third show I've ever done. It was just a brilliant experience. And ever since, I've really worked in episodic. Actually, I haven't even shot a feature in like 5 years. I've been really busy sort of working show to show. And that's kind of the short story, though it seems long.
I mean, it's hard to compress, however many decades of experience, at that point. But it's always interesting to hear people's stories and kind of like where I mean, I didn't get started as a, as a cinematographer, really knowing that I wanted to do film until I got to college. And I find more and more people that I have met who really got started younger. Like you knew from a pretty early age that was there was a trajectory that you knew kind of you wanted to go on.
Yeah, I do feel lucky about that, just having just that feeling. It wasn't specifically cinematography, but I knew film from like a very young age. And then in high school, it really became cinematography. And luckily there's just an amazing magazine that like for a high schooler who's interested in cinematography was like a godsend, cover to cover, a way to kind of have an eye into the industry, and that fed it more and more. And then once I started getting a little more hands-on, it only got worse, I guess, the addiction.
What was there like a film that got you jump started? Like that, oh, that's like, because you mentioned animation.
Yeah.
Obviously animation was part of that.
Yeah.
But was there also like live action stuff?
There was like around the end of high school into film school, there was a string of really inspirational works. I thought I loved Magnolia. Robert Elswit's work was really inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
At that time. Boogie Nights was extremely inspiring, cinematography wise. The Royal Tenenbaums. There was just like a year or two there where really I could see some of this sort of heightened photography I was really attracted to at the time. You see some of that in Dear White People because it's a satire. It's got this sort of heightened feel to it. But there was just a string of really great films right around 2000 that were really inspiring, I think. I'm inspired all the time. I mean, just watching anything on TV now, I'm like, geez.
I was just having that conversation. Yeah. It's funny. Like, I feel like there's a branch of film people who like fall into this camp of like there's nothing good that was made after like 1970, and like the film is on this decline and this and that. And I'm just like, I'm amazed like how much good stuff is made now, like film, TV, everything. Like there's just so many ways in which the bounds are being pushed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which I don't know, I'm always kind of, it's just kind of exciting. I feel like it's an exciting time if you are into cinematography because of all the stuff that is out there that's available to you.
Yeah.
Did you, so like when you got on board Dear White People, what was first of all, could you talk a little bit about just what the process was like to even land a show like that in the first place? Sure. The interview and the kind of the prep you had to do before you even got the job.
For sure. Interestingly, I had seen the movie, and when I got the script to interview with, I was really excited. I knew it was something I really wanted to be a part of, just because it had a lot to say and it had a really interesting way of saying it. I was actually on a show called Brockmire in Atlanta at the time. I was at like a hotel in Macon, Georgia, just like cramming for this, because that was a really wild, busy show. We shot like 8 episodes in like 24 days or something. It was just like, I was like, I gotta. So I prepare a lot in terms of making sure I'm gonna connect in the way, some of the intentions of the director, Justin, could be seen in the feature. So I could talk about what I loved about what he was doing and ideas for how we could push that or play with that or twist that in different ways to introduce in the series. So, prepared. It was Zoom before Zoom was cool, because I was in Macon. And the interview went really well. Of course, I was like, I had done 2 shows before, and I was like, they could, have anybody. What's going to sort of set me apart here? And I think, interestingly, part of what set me apart was they were probably getting a lot of half-hour DP resumes and reels. And TV, this was like one of Netflix's first sort of forays into sort of this boutique half-hour comedy that was going to be a little more cinematic or different than like, I guess, the comedy look of half-hour sitcom, even single camera sitcom stuff. And so I had this interesting combination of enough TV credits that the studio would allow it, but also a lot of indie features where I was pushing visuals in different ways, dark ways, or just different sort of cinematic ways, really raw handheld ways. And I think there was probably a bit of kismet there that I was like possibly, interviewed against people that had come off of more traditional television, and he could see in some of the work I'd done a way to sort of use me to, combine a lot of different sort of styles and approaches into, what became this first season.
Because you, I mean, as an indie cinematographer on the feature, I mean, you had shot like a number of horror films as well, right? And like, lighting wise, obviously you're playing a lot more with kind of mood and tone and kind of abstract framings, probably.
Definitely, yeah. And I also sought out just that variety. Like I love working in all of these genres just because there's so much to play with. Even in the comedy stuff, I had done a couple comedy features, and we always tried to push, me and a specific director always really tried to push the visual on that. But I also done like really raw drama stuff, a couple really sort of stripped down natural light feeling things. So there was, like, I think, enough variety that you could see some versatility there, that was sort of outside the norm, I think.
Well, so how in after you've gotten the show and you're starting to prep and going through that process creatively with Justin, I mean, how much, like, what was that collaborative sort of energy like? Because obviously coming off of the movie, like you said, Justin already had some kind of sense of what this was going to look like and feel like. How much of that then kind of was molded and shaped in that prep process? What was that process like?
So that process was a lot of looking at what sort of the evolution would be. So there's a lot of concepts that, I responded to in the feature, and I was like, that's amazing. Let's, what if we always use that concept when we're trying to say this about a character? We had these long conversations. On a first episode, you have the luxury of time with the director. He's also the creator of the show. So he really wanted to make sure we had a really good sort of foot forward, because we were establishing a look and these sort of cinematic framing devices that would echo through the entire first season. So we spent a lot of time in his office looking at, he's a big fan of he's like a film school guy, classic films, Bergman, Spike Lee. Like, we looked at a lot of references for some of how they were using some of these framing devices, and we kind of created this sort of guide, influenced a bit by the movie, but also all these sort of directions we wanted to go with the show. And we knew that there'd obviously be revolving directors to come and not a lot of time to prep with them. So we created a visual guide in that prep process where I could basically have these long conversations with directors before I even met them about, well, here's sort of the groundwork, or here's what we were thinking. You couldn't be part of this process we had together where we're brainstorming on this stuff, but here's an eye into it. And that's not to say you're going to follow these rules. It's more like, here's sort of where it began, and think along these lines. And that's sort of what the biggest thing that came out of that prep process was. Also, like, that shoot was very indie. They had obvious time constraints, but location restraints and stuff like that. Here we were building stages, so we had a lot to say about what we wanted that to look like and feel like, and how he could sort of further his aesthetic by, what these stage spaces were going to look like, what wallpaper existed in these dorms, as if wallpaper exists in dorms. It's so beautiful and so Justin. Like, there's all this sort of heightening of, I think, the initial instincts he wanted. He could finally start to really push those. It
was funny watching the pilot again. I was struck, like, for example, in the transition sort of after the first time we see Sam on the radio, and then she and Joelle are just walking across campus as we're hearing the different call-ins, and it's these transitions that almost feel incredibly storyboarded. Like, they're very specific, boom, boom, boom,
yes.
And I think this thing that always surprises me about this show, and I remember reading this in the document as well, is that, like, it's shot with two cameras. Like, you guys are using two cameras on a significant number of setups, which is surprising, because I think people have this thought about a two camera shoot is that, well, it's very coverage based and you're not able to get a lot of very composed, specific, storyboarded-esque kind of shots.
Yeah.
Was that a part of your discussion, is how can we maximize that effectiveness and make it still fit the tone of the show?
Yeah, absolutely. There is sort of a two camera look that becomes sort of TV, in that just the mere presence of a second camera dilutes a little bit of what the first one's going to do, even if it just means the light can't be where you want it to be exactly because the other camera's going to see it, or the camera can't get as close as you want it to be, or whatever it is. I was sort of careful to write into that guide. I have actually that page here, but it was kind of like, as much as this was like, here's some of the visual fun we're doing, it was a chance for me to talk to the directors a little bit and say, I know you're probably coming off another half hour where you're using 2 cameras all the time. Here are the instances we use them, and here's how we use them, and here's how we don't tend to use them, just so there wasn't this like, what are you guys doing? So a lot of that first episode stuff is single camera, just because there wasn't always a great B shot. But also, if you have a really inventive, smart B camera operator, like we did, they're always coming. I'm always like, okay, this is a single cam, you know, take a break or whatever, and he'd come up with little, like, I found this, like, if I go under A and I find like, and it's like, that thing's amazing, and he finds some interesting composition, you know, having absorbed all the stuff we were trying to do. That happened a lot. But yeah, Justin's really, you know, great about thinking about the edit too, and those transitions, how he's going to overlay the dialogue. That particular one where they're walking, we did like sort of a jump cut, but we're also dollying on a really long lens. And I think what we did was we actually put like a on the monitor, like a clear panel basically, so we could exactly frame them the same way wherever we went. It was always measured and the same lens, but even on the dolly, it's like where they are in the frame, we would then stick that thing on, make sure they're in their little outlines that we had drawn, and you get this sort of seamless cut to it.
And well, and I guess the thing that's such a part of the visual language of the show is, you know, it's a lot of compositions and coverage of very wide shots of lots of people in the frame at once, right? Like everybody kind of gets their little window of like, you're here and here, and Sam's here, Reggie's here,
Yeah.
and this and that. Can you talk a little bit just the challenges that go into lighting that, and framing those kinds of shots and how you're going to set them up?
So framing wise, very tricky to just like, you know, make sure there's a sort of tableau composition that really works and is balanced. And Justin really likes to get in there. We would maybe rough it in with, you know, second team, the stand-ins or whatever. And then he would get in and be like, okay, you back there, half apple box, you know, raise them up 2 inches or whatever. You're going to on a pad here, so that all the heads are exactly where he wants them. So it's a really fun process. Obviously, television's very fast. So I just remember, all right, you know, that main scene you see here, there's like, I think 4 main sort of tableaus of the different groups, and they're all carefully arranged and lit. Yeah, and then lighting is its own challenge. These ensembles, especially wide lens, a lot of different skin tones, and a lot of people, you know, just naturally further from the window or further from the light. So trying to balance all that is a challenge, and you have to get crafty. But you know, the basic overview was like, if you look at Sam's shot there, she's getting a nice sort of sunny edge from the window, but the main source is this sort of big window feeling push that is like giant and probably 12 by 12 softness kind of bathing the rest of them. And then the people that are far may have their own little light within that 12 by that is focused, you know, through light control kind of right at them, so that they kind of pop up. And then the rest of that stuff, I remember monitoring it, really trying to make it as perfect as we could in the time. And then in the, you know, in the DI and final color, we're able to also then isolate faces and sort of bring it to a balance that feels really pleasing. And so that you can, you know, see everybody for their lines and it feels natural. We always wanted to motivate, you know, that motivates from the window side, but it's very much our movie lighting. And that was kind of the lighting style of this too, had this heightened, like it wasn't going to be this overly natural. It was always, you weren't going to question necessarily where the light comes from. It's not going to be crazy, but it's going to be a heightened version of what a window in that room would do, you know, to amplify sort of the softness of it and the kind of creamy vibe of the whole look.
Well, and I think you've got, obviously, like you were saying at the outset before we screened the pilot, was you have these different visual cues you have to set up, right? Like you have to set up, okay, here's this tableau kind of setup we're going to do. Here's this lighting style we have to do. Here's the kind of steady cam move through the party, and the colors and the kind of like almost unusual surrealness of it compared to everything else,
Right.
you know, and handheld and all these other things. I mean, can you talk a little bit about, because we haven't seen the other episodes, but I know, you know, the show itself branches off after this, and each episode follows an individual character through their experience. How does the show kind of grow visually from that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, you're totally right that everything has to sort of be introduced here in a way, and it's a similar thing to the characters. Like, while this is Sam's episode and it, you know, ends with her in a very strong way, there has to be enough moments with each of the characters so that when we branch off, it sort of makes sense that they warrant their own episode, and then also that some of these styles, you know, could be attributed to the various characters. But the way the arc of sort of the visuals was, yes, like, let's introduce a bit of this, and some episodes are going to really emphasize certain pieces of this as pertain to that character, and play down some of the other stuff. For instance, like, the next episode that comes is Lionel's episode, and while I think Sam's is really about sort of the breakdown of her, like this image she wants to show the world, you know, there's like all these very structured center punched shots of and just sort of beautifully lit I am Sam, you know, on a soapbox kind of vibe. But then there's also this really stripped down naturalistic vibe when she's with Gabe that is kind of like, oh, well, maybe, you know, it's a lot less presentational for her. So while it sort of follows her ups and downs and, you know, kind of culminates in a place where she's sort of owning all the sides of her a little bit more. Lionel, who's the kid with the glasses, in the second episode, you find he's a very like kind of quiet guy, and a lot of things sort of play internally for him. So there's some language stuff, like there's this party he goes to and he's like has these little memories in it that just show up as like almost thought bubbles with like a visual in them. And that's very much a Justin, like I think that's like a De Palma Dress to Kill reference. Very consciously. But there's all these moments where we're really close on him and playing his view of the world, because it's sort of him taking it in, and the finale of that obviously is a very heavy POV moment where he's getting his hair cut and we're very much in his head and with him and feeling that joy. There's a lot of alone moments in his room where it's like he's got a fantasy going on or whatever. So it's still a lot of the same sort of camera and lighting perspective stuff, but it tends to veer towards that. The fifth episode's it's a really intense episode. It's Reggie's episode. And you can see in the first episode, has a sort of confrontational side to himself. And while we didn't actually go handheld in the first episode, there's a couple confrontations that show up in 5 that become more and more handheld. And then like the last 10 or 15, maybe 10 minutes are all handheld. And that was, you know, a director's choice to take something we had introduced and apply it to sort of the intensity of Reggie.
And well, and that's a good lead in, because obviously, like, so Justin directs the first 2 episodes. Barry Jenkins, who directed obviously Moonlight, If Beale Street Could Talk, he directed episode 5.
Yeah.
And there's a number of other directors that you're working with over the course of the season. I mean, the show's so much about point of view, right? And the show has such a specific kind of style, but you know, how does that work for you as a cinematographer, jumping from working with Justin on the first 2 episodes, working with another director, working with another director after that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It actually is interesting because it jumps point of view so much. It's a little less jarring than directors changing on other shows, just because they can kind of own their own character point of view. And they were kind of chosen to specifically because, you know, this would be a good fit as a director for this story. And because they're sort of treated as their own mini movies, it does kind of work. What gets tricky is that you've got some directors doing 2 different POVs and we're overlapping shooting them. So in the same day, we'd shoot a scene from one and another with the same director at the same place, but want to emphasize different things POV wise for each of the characters. So that's where you really want to keep in mind, look at the scene before and after and make sure you know which episode you're in and how it's going to feel and flow, and take cues from the director who's at that point you haven't really prepped with. Take cues there from them about all of the sort of legwork they've done to make sure that they're crafting it in a specific way.
This is kind of branch off a little bit from Dear White People to, like Little Fires Everywhere, for example. You were so instrumental in establishing with Justin the look of Dear White People, and you were the sole cinematographer for the entirety of that first season. But Little Fires Everywhere, you're sort of working with another DP to establish that look, and that DP shot the pilot, and then you came on for the next block of episodes. Can you talk, what is that like to kind of take a visual style that's already sort of pre-established and then kind of, are you able to make it your own? Are you able to like kind of change or have a little bit of an arc that you're adding on top of that? What is that like?
Yeah, that's another really great question, and also a very episodic problem in a way, because you've got not only directors revolving in and out, you've got two DPs that are trying to keep the director's vision somewhat consistent to what you've talked about, and trying to match each other to the degree that sort of fits the through line of the story. Luckily, on a show like that, I had the luxury, while I didn't shoot the first block, I started at the same time. So we were choosing equipment, lenses, testing, lighting the stages, sort of making all notes on that together as a team, more than me sort of showing up and getting a cut of the first episode and being like, here's the deal. So we were sort of able to talk with Liz Tigelaar, who was the showrunner, and the producers and EPs a little bit more in depth before even they rolled a frame on the first unit, so that we were really making sure we were telling the same story. The other thing is that there is like a visual arc in that show that it is sort of upon the DP, whoever's up next, to sort of further. So it's sort of a handoff in a way that it doesn't have to match exactly perfectly. You're able to sort of interpret this arc the same way, like be very clear about what it means and what those framing devices are, what those lighting devices are. But obviously bring your own artistry to it, because, it may be, whatever the idea is. And in that show, there's actually an arc of the seasons. It goes from like a late summer warmth to a very cold, in contrast to winter climax. So, we basically, the first couple episodes have more of sort of this 90s sort of filled, sort of lighter vibe to it. And then the palette starts to darken as the days get shorter and snow starts, reflecting in through the windows. It just has this sort of bluer quality to it. So there was always a chance to sort of take that idea and as long as we were all clear with each other what it was, run with it in our own directions. We would still be facing our own challenges that were, we weren't shooting in all the same places and all that stuff. So there was a lot of creative freedom to interpret what that was for what our episode needed. And yeah, I think that helped a lot in terms of like not feeling like you're just here to like match, they shot in this room before and this is exactly how it's got to be. Luckily there was like a thematic thrust that's like, now when we're in this room, it's winter and it's got a totally different vibe,
Does it, because you're bringing on, I imagine there's a consistency in the crew and a
Absolutely.
consistency sort of the process there, but how much, like, is it as simple as like, well, I'm going to add a little more negative fill to this scene? Am I going to subtly adjust this framing or add an eye light? How much, like, how drastic do the changes get? Like, how far are you able to go?
I think you're always just pushing that a little bit to see like, how's everyone feeling about this? Because we went really moody on the third and fourth episodes. And the response was good. I don't think consciously, like when we're lighting a specific shot, we were like, okay, they've done this, but what if we do it a little bit? It was more, anytime you're in one of these things and you know what it's like in the middle of a shoot, and especially a long shoot, you're running on a lot of instinct and sort of personal cinematic improv in some ways, where you're like, okay, Reese wants to go and land over there and there's a window over there. We're going to push that way and maybe we won't fill it. or whatever, you know, you're interpreting all the thematic conversations you've always had, but they're like, it starts to become automatic a little bit and less like very specific. We're going to do this because this is where this is going. It just, it also just lent itself towards that, because like more scenes were written as night scenes as winter grows and all that stuff. So it naturally also had license to kind of get darker and moodier.
Are you able then, I mean, because obviously in episodic television, and like you were just saying, like schedule wise, like you're okay, we're shooting 2 episodes, but we're kind of overlapping with this and that and trying to put these scheduling and working with, you know, an AD has got to be such a huge thing. Like can you talk about just the collaboration with ADs in particular, but also just the crew? Like how are you collaborating with them throughout that process?
I think the DP AD relationship is one that I just make sure to really cultivate early, because when you're on set, you're like, you have to be allied, and you and the director and the AD are going to make the day and make it well, or crash and burn. So everything, you know, all the success of a shooting day is you and the AD, and also the director, of course. You don't want the director to have to get too involved in some of the scheduling concerns you have. You want them to be able to do their work. So you just want to make sure that I'm very instrumental in trying to play with the schedule in prep, see the schedules, you know, as they're coming for future episodes, and say, you know, can we put these 2 on the same day, because I have a very similar setup for them, and that'll actually buy us some time. You know, for day exteriors, it's the most important thing ever, is to like know where you're going to be, where the sun's going to be, and really be specific about it. There's some great apps that, like on a location scout, you can be like, all right, what time of day do you have us shooting this scene? They're like, first in the morning. I'm like, can we please make it like 4 p.m.? Because in the morning, it's going to take longer and then still look worse, versus like at 4 p.m., actually, I won't have to add anything, because the sun's going to be right where I want it, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to go faster, and we'll be able to, you know, make our day and make it beautiful. And obviously, they have a lot of other crazy stuff, cast availability, a hair and makeup change, all this stuff you're not thinking about, but definitely weighing in with them and allying yourself with them, and, you know, becoming a team and a unit is super helpful, especially at the pace of television, which is very fast and furious. With the crew, I try to be, you know, as good a leader as I can, and like I try to, first of all, try to place a crew together that has amazing attitudes and amazing filmmaking ability, so that I have this well of amazing ideas coming at me all day. That's amazing, and just listening to those and using the best ones is like can help everybody, and it makes them, you know, feel like they're a part of the creation, which they should be, but they're not always sort of treated that way. So I really try to have a really chill time, because it's a very stressful business, and a shooting day is very stressful, and I try to internalize a lot of that and just keep a very smooth operation, and try to be the kind of leader I want to work with, or try to you know, hopefully the director's the same way, and that's when everything really, all the magic starts to happen.
Well, because it feels like always, I feel like the part of being a cinematographer that a lot of students don't necessarily realize right off the bat is that so much of your job is just being a manager and really understanding the personalities and being good at communicating those things, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't something I learned in film school, of course. Like, weirdly, it's so much of the job, and being persuasive about what you need to do to make sure you can do your job properly in a way that everyone's going to love, and to be political about you know, how you handle situations. There's all kinds of just interpersonal skills that I've had to develop, because, you know, the craft of it will develop. You'll keep working, and you'll get better, and you're obsessed with that, and you'll always be building that. But these other sides aren't necessarily something you're studying or trying to work on. But like, you know, sometimes I'll put down the American Cinematographer and read a book on leadership or whatever. Like, these are the things that can somehow translate to better cinematography all the time. Other things that like have really helped me is like I got into long distance running, because actually endurance is a huge asset. So I started doing 2 half marathons a year. And once I started doing those, like these 2 or 3 month, sometimes 4-month long jobs just feel like unending. And if you're able to sort of keep your wits about you and sort of pace your energy through them, you'll actually not get so chewed up and spit out, which they can be, especially these half hours where you're shooting every episode. There's never a down day, and you know, filming days can be long, and even when they are just 12 hours, they take everything out of you, and you're not sleeping well because you're looking at the schedule for the next week, and you're meeting the director at lunch about what the next episode's going to be. So I think, you know, taking care of yourself, meditation is very helpful to me. Visualization is very helpful to me, and just as a tool for, you don't have a lot of time on set. You got to be working, and you've got to have the right answer already planned. And sometimes you're getting the script the week before, and you haven't seen this location before, and you're meeting the director for the first time, and you have to just sort of develop improv skills as well. I call them improv skills, where it's just like, okay, I see where the windows are here. I see where they're going to have to come in. And I already have ways, I already have like a plan of where I hope they can land, or hope we can work so that the lighting is going to come naturally and look beautiful. So there's sort of the improv side, there's the visualization side, which is like when you've seen your locations and you know your script and you've talked about the blocking with the director already, you can sort of just go in and place all your lights and make sure you know everything you're going to need, because as soon as you're in that day, you need to be telling somebody everything that's, you know, it's all got to be working, because you really can't miss a beat. It's a very ferocious lifestyle.
Yeah, and I understand that. I feel like is there a difference in that between the feature work that you were doing, especially at the indie level, and the TV side of things? Because you know, it's interesting. Like we were talking about this the other day about like film and TV have sort of, there's this merging and melding of styles that has sort of happened, where a lot of indie films tend to be shot like television now, and a lot of TV is starting to be shot like more heightened, like Dear White People has a very heightened sort of look, and you're referencing films and things like that in those things. Like what is the comparison like for you, like going from features into these shows? You know, what is it similar? I mean, is the creative process similar? Is the scheduling?
It is very similar. It would be a much harder transition to come from, I think, bigger features to television, because while the budgets can still be high in television, the pace is very fast. And I think features, especially, you know, it's all changing quite a bit with streaming and all that, but they used to have a lot more time than TV, certainly. TV has a little, you know, prestige TV has more time than, you know, some of the TV we grew up with, but it's still not like now it's like a feature every week or something like that. So indie film is kind of the perfect training, and that's why I think you have a lot of directors coming from indie film into television. You've got a lot of DPs that did well in indie film translating really nicely to episodic, because you never have enough time on an indie film, and you never have enough gear and all that stuff. You're used to working within limitations. And I think if I had come from like a bigger feature world, I'd be like, this is insane that you guys are trying to pull this stuff off at this pace. But when you've like come up doing that, it's a lot simpler, because at least you generally have more tools at your disposal, or more crew at your disposal. While if you're still shooting the same page count per day, which you kind of are as like you know, what an indie film might do, you can still you have a little bit more resources usually per minute that you can hopefully make it look more big and expensive. But I mean, that's always been the game in indie film for me. It was always trying to make it look bigger and more expensive. So it was a really good training, and it was actually a natural transition. Just the schedules are a lot longer, so you can like work at a breakneck pace for an 18-day feature and then collapse. but you got to keep going. And that's where the endurance comes in, just to stay, mentally stable and calm and able to access all of your those skills I'm talking about. Improvisation and visualization and all that stuff still has to work for you. So if you're just fried, it's no good.
This is going to be kind of a not a tangent, but I'm curious about this because you look at the shows that kind of you've been a part of over the past several years between, Dear White People and Mrs. Fletcher and Glow as well, and Little Fires Everywhere. I mean, there are a lot of very sort of constant themes going on in those shows. I mean, obviously, Dear White People and Little Fires Everywhere are so much about racism, so much about class and things like that. And Mrs. Fletcher and Glow are very much about women sort of coming into their own. And Dear White People and Little Fires Everywhere is about that as well. I mean, you Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington.
Right.
You have these two incredible titans of actresses. And so, do you? I don't know. Like, do you gravitate towards like do you sense that you start to gravitate towards specific stories more?
Yeah,
Like,
I absolutely do. I mean, I'm drawn to projects that have a strong social undercurrent, has something to say about society and where we're at and where we could go. A lot of that comes from a strong documentary background. A lot of it comes from, I had a privileged upbringing and I went to very expensive film schools. And how can I use my skills to further talk about things that need to be talked about? There's just this feeling that I want to contribute to these discussions, and what's the way that I, as a straight white guy, can help facilitate this stuff? Any way that I can collaborate with these amazing filmmakers from all backgrounds. And it's just always been something I've yearned to do, and really lucky to be presented with projects that have these sort of strong social undercurrents and things to say. I've always sought out doc stuff. I have a doc background. I directed a doc about just slavery in the Thai fishing industry, a really heavy subject, but really dear to my heart and my co-director's heart. And I've just always been looking for ways to use talent, experience, privilege to help people that are less privileged and don't have all this stuff, immediately at their disposal. I mean, that's basically.
No, well, it's interesting thinking about, I mean, we hear so much about directors who, have a vision and an arc to their careers, there's auteur theory and all these sorts of things. But it's interesting to see the ways that cinematographers, you establish a look that you're kind of known for, or you establish like a kind of story that you gravitate towards. I mean, are you aware of that while you're in it? I mean, besides, like you said, you're obviously hoping for, you're seeking out those kinds of stories,
Yeah.
And those kinds of crews and those kinds of directors. But
Yeah.
are you aware of, like, do you feel like you have a look? I mean, do you sense that as you're in the thick of it, or is it something you're sort of like hindsight, oh wow, I've done a lot of sort of things that have a similar vibe? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I have instincts that I listen to. Usually they're filtered through the initial conversations, but I do think there's stuff I like. There's a certain lighting approach that I just like even if I'm trying to do something totally outside of my realm, I may start with something and then, my process is somewhat, I guess, reductive, subtractive, just like softening this and working on this and just honestly using my eyes and instinct at the monitor to say, okay, turn that one off. Okay, bring it back up. All right, that one down a little. Let's soften that again, put another softness on that. A lot of softening going on. All that kind of, and then by the end of that, I'm like, oh, that's me, but it's also this project. So I do feel like there's a piece of what I love to see and create in each of these that, I think every cinematographer that has whatever these initial visual conversations and reads the same script is going to approach things in their own sort of idiosyncratic way. So I don't know if that answers the question.
No, I don't know if there's, it might be a very good question. I don't know. Like it's just been something that I've thought about a lot, and part of that's just the classes I teach, I guess. But like thinking about, you know, the totality of the things that you've shot. And I mean, your documentary background, like you said, I mean, you're thinking about things in such a different way visually when you're just running, gunning, got to get this shot and this shot, and I don't have control over what's in front of me.
Right.
So much of that is instinct. Like you're
Yeah,
literally just figuring out, okay, well, I got to figure out a frame, and this is what I think is going to be the best frame in the time I have. That's just, you're literally running on
absolutely. And
that
that's
instinct.
amazing practice. That's like, it's so good for your brain. um, that I think influences a lot of what I do, and has helped me develop that sort of improv side where, let's say for some reason I land on something and there's been no prep, I know I can turn a scene into something that looks like it needs to look to tell the story. Like I just have that, I've been building that sort of bed to fall on. And it gets better all the time. I look back honestly at like this episode and I'm like, wow, there's things I would do differently. And like, you know, every you roll the camera, you're, you know, learning something that worked and something that doesn't work. So you're constantly, hopefully building. And I'm also I try to be very self-reflective about how a job went politically, like every aspect of it, and be like, how can we improve that on the next one? What are the big takeaways? I have like an ongoing book I'm writing to myself, essentially, of like that I want to, you know, read through at the beginning of every new show and just be like, here's things to keep in mind. Here's something that bit you and you never saw it coming. All that stuff. But also just watching old stuff is like watching what you've shot that you may have thought was really great, and being like, oh wow, I've grown a lot. And what if I was in this same situation of this shot that I hate again? How would I approach it in the same amount of time, and how do I prevent this from happening? And of course it's stuff that nobody probably cares about, but it's stuff that like when I've, you know, I lie awake thinking about on the night, you know, after the shoot, just like, damn, you know.
Do you feel like, priority wise, I mean, on a show like Dear White People, it is so heightened versus like Little Fires Everywhere is so much more about the the character drama that goes into that. I mean, priority wise, do you start to like, I mean, do you respond to that like as that changes, like on a show, like, oh, like, you know, we need to give the actors some extra space here. We're lighting a little more minimally to make sure it's
Sure.
not this forest of C stands around
Yeah.
them as they're giving this performance. I mean, are you thinking about that as well, or is that something the director tells you? Like,
You're always thinking about that. You're also, you know, thinking about your stuff, and, you know, sometimes pushing a little bit to test, you know, what if we put this here? Is that going to be an issue? It's not, obviously I try to, once we've blocked, I know the spaces and parameters they're going to want to work. And some, I've been on like stuff where, you know, the actors you can see are put off by how bright something is or how close the camera gets at some point. You see it in the performance, and, you know, that's a time to back off. And there's definitely a style where it's like, uh, you know, maybe we won't light at all because we want it to be this most naturalistic thing. I mean, Little Fires is also kind of a, it's not as heightened, but it also does have a little bit of this sort of fable kind of quality of these two women representing, you know, America in some way. So it's not the most raw thing, and taking care of Reese is a big part of that job. And so there's, you know, there's a lot of lights and diffusion around and all that stuff. And you know, you want everyone to look good, and you're working, you know, you're working with their people too, in terms of like their production company and stuff like that. And you're feeling those questions out early, like, is this going to bother her if I put this up? You know, that stuff you want to definitely tread lightly, and also do your best work and make everybody look amazing. And you know, you're just constantly feeling that stuff out. You know, certain actors don't, you know, certain actors you're comfortable tweaking the blocking to, you know, make the shot look better, and others you just want to let them, you know, have exactly what they feel for their character and not even have that conversation. I tend to just like let marking happen the way the actors want to do it and figure out the way that's going to work, unless it's going to be a really difficult, like it's going to add time. That's basically, if I see something, I'm like, that's going to take double the time, then everyone can be like, oh, okay, let's find a slightly different solution. And honestly, all these actors and actresses are amazing at working with you and the director to find that common ground where they're going to be able to do their work, you're going to be able to do your work, and come out with a great result all around.
Because they're aware of that to some degree. When you work with a really talented actor or actress who's been around doing this for a very long time, I mean, to some extent, are they aware of how they're lit, of how they're lensed, of how other DPs have framed them? Like, are they studying that? Is that part of their skill set, like interacting with you?
So I've had that. I have had that. It's not common. They basically do want to look good in dailies, and so they're not necessarily, telling you how to light them or like concerned when they don't see something. I've had notes where they weren't looking at a monitor of themselves, but they're just like, there's just not enough bounce around. So you put up all the bounces you got and, make them feel comfortable and make them feel like, that's what they want to see. That's what brings them comfort. It's not usual, I would say. But, they're going to watch dailies. And if they don't look good, there's going to be conversations.
But so they're actively involved in that to some degree. It's just, it depends on you're assessing that out, like as we say the politics of it, but as the DP, you're managing those expectations, right?
You are. You want you want it to look good. You want the show to look good. I mean, that's what it's coming down to. Sometimes it's less vanity than like, I have concerns about what's happening here. I've been really lucky I'm also just try to be extremely flexible. So we plan and plan and plan, but also feel out the vibe of the room, feel out how those conversations are going, and make sure you can turn it, make everybody feel comfortable. That's when everyone's doing their best work, and make everybody look good. And look good can sometimes mean bad, meaning you're telling the story, it looks good for what you're setting out to do. And I don't know, I just love that whole collaboration. It's never been like it's always been concern for, are we making the best product, if anything.
When you're doing this sort of work, like on location versus in a studio, like, Dear White People is sort of half and half to some degree, right? I mean, how does the calculus change when you've got sort of full control over the space? You've been there while it was being built, you've rigged it and all this stuff, versus, okay, we're on location, like there are all these considerations. How does your process change when you're thinking about all that stuff?
Yeah, location's certainly more tricky, but exciting, because I really believe like choosing great locations is such a huge part of cinematography. You can't detach it really in any way. What you're shooting is the location and faces within it. So there's always an amazing opportunity to get out there and do, beautiful work in locations. You do need to keep your eyes on the sun, even for interiors. Let's say it's a church with stained glass windows or something. You still want to make sure you're in the right place at the right time. And if you can't be, then you need to tent those windows or whatever, keep the sun off of them, build a sort of ledge eyebrow, and like pound some real big lights through. You just have to do a lot more planning. Obviously, that sort of improv skill of like how you're going to pull together the lighting and look on a stage is a lot simpler, and pre-visualizing and planning is everything on a location. Now, on a show like Dear White People, where it's you're shooting every episode and you're not going on these scouts, let's say for like episode 6 or 7 down the line, you're shooting while they're scouting. A couple members of your crew, usually it's going to be the best boy grip and best boy electric. Sometimes it's the gaffer and the key grip, and they're covered on set by their best boys. They're going to basically take pictures for you and try to plan everything you could predict. They sort of try to get to know you very well and be like, you're going to want this, this, and this. I'm going to put a light here, here, here. There's going to be power here, all that stuff. And then they come back with pictures and like, what do you want to do here? Do you want to, and then you try to make sure you have the right equipment and coverage for showing up and executing to the best, in the best way possible. One interesting thing we did on one of the shows was like the on those little scouts, they'd take somebody would take like a 360 photo, like a VR photo, and then bring it back, and I would goggle up on set and be sort of able to look around the location and be like, oh, that beam up there, can we like light up there? Like that was actually pretty useful. But the great thing about the alternating DP thing, while it does have its challenges, is the ability to shoot your episodes, and then you go into prep for like a month with your director for the next 2 episodes, and you get to visit all those locations, you get to tech scout them and make sure you're totally good to go.
Because you're kind of leapfrogging a little bit, like
exactly.
They're shooting while you're doing this, and then you're shooting while they're doing that. Yeah.
And the main crew is still the same. So you're borrowing, who you can to bring on your scouts, but at least you have a DP on those scouts.
Something, okay, this is going to go back a little bit, because I remember we talked about this and I was really intrigued by it, is Dear White People, you've got the movie that was sort of like the initial sort of informing of things, but Little Fires Everywhere and Mrs. Fletcher are based on books.
Right.
And the prose that sort of inhabits those books is very specific and very much its own style. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like as a cinematographer thinking in terms of that adaptation, like visualizing the words on a page, and how does that change the look of things when you're filming?
Totally. Yeah, it's a really great exercise because in adaptations, obviously the dialogue's pretty easy to translate. Not that these are easy adaptations at all. Actually, there's a lot of restructuring and a lot of obviously rewriting these characters, and the characters in the books and the movies are quite different, all that stuff. But that's more of a one-to-one sort of adaptation. But what's missing, from the author's sort of intention in a screenplay usually is like, is this told in sort of a streams of consciousness vibe, or is this in a very formal and flowery vibe? Is there an omniscient narrator who knows thoughts in people's heads? And then you have to sort of decide what's going to be, how are we going to sort of weave the fabric around this dialogue and stay true to the intentions of the book. And let's say it is omniscient, and after everyone says something we hear, but they were really thinking this. All that stuff is obviously interpreted by the actors, but also, do we want to see them see something more? Do we want to embed with their point of view a lot more, versus something that's more sort of streams of consciousness or first person? Is that more objective feeling? Is that more handheld raw doc style? It's an interesting question. It's a really interesting exercise. I've found even in non-adaptations, like trying to decide what that language might feel like for what the tone is, because it's such a great starting point for like developing the tone. And basically the visuals are that, that side of the storytelling. So it's just a great place for inspiration. It's not necessarily something they're expecting you to do, but it is something that can help bring, the words in between the dialogue to the screen in a way that feels appropriate. If it's like really descriptive and really flowery and really formal, then maybe it is more pushes and more slick lighting and all that stuff. You could sort of peel it apart and make your own interpretation of that. And then obviously present that to the director and showrunner and see if that feels right, and see if they were interpreting those similar sort of vibes.
Do you ever, does that ever happen to you where like you come in like riding hot with like a lot of really great ideas for something? Like you've done this homework and you put together this whole lookbook and you present it and the director's like, yeah, no, we're not. Like, does that ever happen? Or is it really like, have you been lucky enough to have those collaborations where they're like, well, let's combine the things that we're thinking about and something else? I don't know.
Yeah, something like that has happened, and it's usually not just like, no, that's not going to work. It's more kind of like, I like this about this and this about this. But I really think, lookbooks are a great tool, but you have to use them wisely, because you can be using an image to tell them one thing you're interested in doing, but there's so much attached to an image, especially if it's from a movie or a TV show where they're responding to like, oh, I don't like that show, so why would we, or like, I don't like, why are they in that weird room? And I'm like, well, I'm talking about depth of field. See what, like it's kind of a slippery slope to try to really communicate everything you want to do from pictures of other things to everybody. A lot of people just get exactly what you're trying to say. So you just, I try to use more words than pictures, or use sparing pictures and like, here's exactly what I'm thinking about, why this works for me, or there's an emotion here that I would describe as this. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And, maybe I'd say it's rare that you feel like you worked hard and they're like, we don't like it. I think if you got the job, you've already like pretty much on the same page about most things.
Do you feel like when it gets to that point, like, I don't know, like in the interview process, as you're going for those kinds of jobs and you're prepping these things, I mean, is there a sense of you're trying to like give them what they want? Or you trying to present yourself? Or like, how does that like push pull kind of work when you're in the process of getting the job?
It's all of those things. I am always just trying to sell my potential for them, basically. So, trying to weave together things I've done in the past as examples of like, a version of it is very helpful. I try not to be overly descriptive about, this is exactly what I'm thinking it should look like, because they definitely probably already have something in mind. And there's a bit of this feeling that you're trying to guess it, or that they're waiting for the person that like guesses it exactly or sees it exactly the same way. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the best DP for the job. And I'm also just not trying to lock in a lot of ideas in the interview process, though I will often put together images and words and a sense of like, here's vibes I'm getting, but really kind of caution that it's like a stream of consciousness from reading the script. And these are sort of the things that are bubbling up, and I can't wait to collaborate with you and bring some of these to the table and merge them with what you're thinking. And just sort of get in, their head and try to solve a problem for them. They're looking for a great collaborator who gets what the script is saying and has a lot of ideas in general, and can sort of focus those into really specific plans together. So that's kind of, it's a lot of those sort of, I prepare a lot for an interview, and it's a lot of just trying to sell that I'm going to, whatever they have in mind, if it's what I'm presenting or something else, like I can help them be a really great ally in pulling it off.
I want to ask one more question, then we're going to open it up. The students have been asking questions in the chat, and so I'm going to kind of moderate those questions and field them to you on their behalf. But in terms of, this is going to go back to kind of the idea of getting the job and stuff like that. Was there a point where you were able to get an agent and start getting those kinds of jobs sort of fielded to you versus actively having to sort of go out and do that legwork? Like, what was the turning point for you in that?
You know what? There was like a fake out turning point. This is like, it's one of those things where like the real lines are like crazy how you get from point A to point B. But I was on an indie feature. I think it was like the second or third one I ever did. I was nominated for an Independent Spirit Award for Best Cinematography when I was like 30. This was a while ago. I'm old now, but
I feel that as well.
And it was just sort of an amazing moment for me. It was totally out of the blue. It had premiered at Berlin. It was this very small, intimate, very low budget feature, all handheld, very naturalistic. I was proud of it, but I didn't, foresee this amazing moment. And I was kind of like, I actually working with Justin Cameron, our mutual friend.
Oh yeah.
In Madison, Wisconsin, and like the nominees list came out. I was like, wow, that's crazy. And then suddenly I had all these voicemails from agents. I'm like, oh, this is like happening. This is crazy. And I ended up going with one and realizing at some point, you know, in the next like 6 months or so, that like I could have a really great agent, but until I'm actually at the level of development that I can really crush any of these possibilities that are coming in, like I just don't feel they're going to come to me in some way. And that's kind of what happened. Like there's little bits and little bites, and nothing super interesting or up my alley. It was kind of like the dregs of whatever was at the agency, just because I was like, I had one feature, and then, you know, I was in league with a lot of really competitive and amazing DPs. And at some point, I mean, everything was really still coming from my networks. And at some point, I just called them and I was like, I don't think I need an agent right now. I was still getting everything myself. I wasn't, you know, necessarily wanting to pay them for that stuff. But also I was just so low on the totem pole that I, you know, if I was interviewing for a feature and it came down to sort of negotiating rate, and I said, okay, call my agent, really proudly, you know, I've been waiting for forever. And then like it took them a little while to get back to them. And I'm like, just such not a priority that I was just kind of like, oh, you know, this thing I wanted and thought was like the next step actually wasn't. The next step was actually getting really good. So it was kind of an interesting time, and it took another 10 features and, you know, of all different budgets sort of going up. And then really a couple pilots, even union pilots, before an agent again came out of the woodwork and was like, I think I can do something with you. So yeah, it was a really interesting sort of journey, and a little bit confusing, because I think, you know, especially when you graduate, you're like, I got to get an agent and all this stuff. And it's like, you're no good for an agent, and an agent's no good for you until you're like really, you put in the time to improve yourself. And that's not only skills wise, but all that stuff we've talked about, politically, socially, leadership wise. Like it kind of took a lot of that stuff culminating in sort of a bigger understanding about who I am to launch my career, versus this sort of lottery win, you know, nomination and agent that sort of popped in for a little while.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't know why that occurred to me, but that's a really interesting kind of way of looking at that I hadn't heard before. So, all right, okay. So anyway, let's. I want to open it up to the questions from students here. I've got a whole kind of list of them that's been curated so far. I'm sure I'm going to butcher names as I'm doing this, but we'll do our best. BB wants to know, what's your favorite part of the filming process on a whole? Like, where do you get most excited as you're doing stuff?
That's a great question, because there's a couple really special moments. Honestly, being on set and looking at a monitor and being proud of something that we're doing is everything. You know, that's the drug a little bit. That's what so much time and energy and sort of endurance, all these things sort of culminates to, is like, oh, we're doing it, and here it is, and it's like it's good. Like that's it. Seeing a shot come together, that's you know, that never gets old. That's me as a kid, you know, animating or whatever. It's just it's the magic of it. I love the initial phases of, you know, coming up with an approach with another collaborator or a handful of them. I love color correction. It's like a time to play and perfect things and fix things that have been bothering you, or at least try to, because it's another sort of like moment to sort of paint and play. I really enjoy that. So I hope that answers the question, but yeah.
You love all of it, but especially
I really do. I mean, I love this job. It's really cool. It's amazing.
I felt like I always realized very early on like I had an internship very early on that was just like a desk job, where it's literally like answering phones and doing coverage for scripts. And I was sitting at that desk being like, gosh, I just want to be on set right now. It's like all I want. And I feel like but you have to do all those things, right? Like
Oh
that's
yeah.
part of it too. Like you said, like you did ACing for a little bit and you realize, well, like that's not the trajectory I want to go down.
Yeah. I also shot like just awful stuff. Like, I shot honestly like weird seminars in like hotel ballrooms for $100. Like there was years where just like you just want to pay the rent and eat, and you're happy to get whatever it is, and it's all sort of building. You're really not getting anything out of that than money. It's like operating a camera while a guy talks about foreclosures or whatever. And I did a lot of that stuff just to sort of make ends meet. So it's it's exciting to create, at any level ever. It's like a TV show or those indie films where it was like 50K budget, crazy 10-day thing. In the middle of it, when you're in that like sort of flow where it's all sort of coming together and you're nervous and excited and, everybody's running around. It's good stuff.
For sure. All right. Steve Niss, my good friend Steve Niss, wants to know, do you see a continued shift away from indie feature filmmaking as episodic and streaming starts becoming more and more popular? Like, do you feel like the tide, has shifted to Netflix and Disney Plus and all these places where like these limited series events and these, these shows that keep getting put up,
I do think, I don't know about indie filmmaking. I think there used to be like a kind of studio feature that doesn't get made anymore, that is like a story that's not like a Marvel story, that was maybe like 30 million, that would now be like a TV series where they can explore a little bit more. And then they're sort of saving really the 200-300 million dollar movies, or like the things that are in what we used to call movie theaters. I don't know what's going to happen with all that, how that affects this conversation. I think there's always going to be independent film, because episodic still is like a little bit studio, in that there's always a studio involved, or a channel, a network, and it's always union. So there's always going to be a hunger for younger filmmakers to make their own stuff, and that's sort of the birth of indie filmmaking and where it comes from. And it's such a great I don't see, I guess, you start to see sort of coming out of the web series world a bit of like indie episodic, which is maybe a new thing to think about. But I think there's always going to be people that will have a story to tell and not have not be in the union and want to do something by their bootstraps on a low budget. It's amazing that it took so long for it to become such a thing, but I think it's always going to be there.
Well, and I think it's interesting too that like so many of these streaming services, the episodic TV that they're making, when you do network TV, the guardrails are there of like, 22 minutes, 42 to 46 minutes, and you got commercial break. It's like very regimented to some degree. And I remember feeling that, like watching like Stranger Things, for example, like one episode's 50 minutes, one episode's 65 minutes, one episode's 42 minutes, and then The Mandalorian's like 35 minutes for a first episode. But like it varies so much, it feels like there's less, from a storytelling standpoint, it feels different as well.
It is, yeah. Because of those restrictions, you're totally right. And the format of like whatever, was it 44 and 22?
Yeah.
It was also built into the writing in a weird way. It was like, you need this moment, this cliffhanger before the commercial break. How are you get them back after that? Like it was in the scripts in a weird way that it doesn't have to be anymore.
Yeah. Lisa wants to know, good, getting me gear stuff now. Is there a standard camera and lens package you prefer to use? Or does the studio choose it? How involved are they in that process? And that's good for Dear White People to talk about that specifically with Netflix.
Yeah, that's a great question. You really, it is your choice. There are specifications that you have to meet. And at the time we did Dear White People, which was again like 4.5 years ago or so, it was mostly red and the original Alexa, and maybe one or yeah, I'm trying to think what the other sort of cinema.
It's like the
Yeah,
Varicam
maybe the Panasonic Varicam had
C300.
came out. Yeah, and basically Netflix created this mandate that's like everything has to be 4K raw, and so the camera that was doing that was always whatever the latest red was. It was this weird period where you couldn't shoot an Alexa on Netflix, which was crazy. And so that had a lot to do with what we ended up going with. And I think we ended up going with whatever the like newest red was at the time. And I'm trying to remember what that is because there were a lot of changes in those years. But lens choice is, if it's, as long as it's sort of fitting their prescribed budget, is up to you. And I don't have a preferred in that I choose show to show. It's, lens choice is a storytelling tool as much as anything. For Mrs. Fletcher, we used like vintage sort of 80s lenses with a lot of kind of problems. For Dear White People, we went with a more sort of formal, sort of precise lens. We went with master primes, which is like a very engineered sort of kind of fitting with, sort of the symmetry and all the, it doesn't have a lot of distortion. It opens up really wide because we wanted that shallow depth of field, and it didn't really break down when you did that. A lot of lenses do as you kind of get towards the wider open. So that sort of fit there. But yeah, it honestly changes job to job based on a lot of different parameters. Specs are a lot easier to meet now with all these other camera options. So lenses now, it is an interesting conversation, and not to get too nerdy about it, but with sort of the full frame cameras, you're not able to necessarily use all the lenses you used to love because a lot of them don't cover full frame. And as there's sort of a true 4K mandate, you at least need to cover that. And so like on the LF, you'll need something that's a little, has a bigger back to it. So, but you still have a lot to choose from. There's a lot of new lenses that cover that, and it's up to you to choose what that is.
Do you feel like you have to do a significant amount of testing, like before you get on set to find that look? Or do you feel like, oh, I've worked with enough lenses now and I can kind of pinpoint, well, the master primes have this kind of sharpness and this, hyper shallow depth of field. Oh, I want to use these kind of old school anamorphic lenses. I mean, how much of that do you get to do testing beforehand? How much of that is like, I know what I want and I'm going to pitch these two lenses and just pick the ones that's in the budget?
Yeah, sometimes it's that. Sometimes you read it and you talk to the director and, showrunner, creator, and you're like, oh, I know exactly what this is. Like, I know it's going to be perfect. Often you'll want to couple them with some kind of diffusion filtration or something, and that's something you want to test different strengths of that and see if that's the right fit and different, versions of that. Sometimes you want to experiment and you go to the camera house that you're going to use usually and say, hey, can you pull out these 3 different lenses? And they'll set you up with a body and you can kind of test them, see how they flare and do all that stuff. What's interesting too is Panavision, like on Little Fires, and I just did the new Gossip Girl pilot. Panavision can take apart their lenses and sort of recalibrate them. They call it detuning, where you can kind of build in characteristics to their sort of, like you can take their Primos, for instance, which is sort of it's kind of like their Cooke S4, kind of like like a beautiful rounded, but sort of down the middle sort of look, not super vintage, but also not really clinical. And you can create, like, make it a little more flary and make it a little more misty and like try to match older lenses with it. So Panavision is doing some really interesting stuff. I know Aries doing that, I think, with their DNA lenses. There's sort of a new way of approaching lenses where each show can have a custom lens, and like, while it may be the same, Primo or whatever it is, on 2 shows, they're totally calibrated differently, and one looks like a vintage lens and one doesn't. So it's getting kind of cool.
This is exactly the type of nerdy that I like. So I'm super excited about this. Well, okay, move on. Cassie wants to ask, and this is kind of an interesting question maybe to talk about with TV versus indie as well. When you're rolling on a scene, have you found that you have a preference for where the director stands? Like, do you want them behind a video village? Are you at video village? If the blocking allows for it, are they standing near the cameras? Like, I don't know, like in India, I feel like I'm operating most of the time when I shoot
Sure.
indie films, so I don't have as much of a sense of that necessarily. But do you have a preference? I mean, is it something that
It honestly is
you're aware of?
director to director. They have their own preferences. My preference is to make the director as comfortable as possible. I love watching with them. If they want to come join me, I'm usually at the DIT on the really calibrated monitors, and I usually have my iris controls there. A lot of them feel comfortable taking like the smaller handheld monitors, putting them on a stand, and getting really close to the camera so they can, look up and watch the action happening. Others prefer to be at sort of the usually also a bigger village where the producers are, and on a show where producers and showrunners have a lot of notes, sometimes it's helpful to have that discussion after every take right there. I honestly just want to support the director in any way possible. I love being able to have close communication. So if they're on set with the minis, or they're with me, or even if they're at the big village, I like to run over and see how everybody's feeling and stuff like that. But it's a good question.
No, I always feel like too, as an operator, on the few takes where I'm not operating and I'll stand, like if there's a steady cam op and I'm standing by Video Village with the director and the script supervisor, and there are all these conversations that you suddenly get to bear witness to.
Yeah.
I always find that very insightful, like, because it's just cataloging more information. I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, being close to the script is really handy too, because you often want to bounce thoughts or line questions, eyeline questions. At the same time, there's something nice about being there with your DIT, and sort of that noise isn't a part of it.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of conversations that will, everybody approaches the director after you take and wants to ask about something, and you don't want to get in the way for sure. And sometimes you just want to, sometimes I'll wear the comms and listen to the full performances, but a lot of the time I'm going like just pure visual and just like really scrutinizing everything. And also a lot of times, especially in COVID, where it's like running onto set to go talk to the operators is a little trickier. It's like trying to keep it a very minimal crew. Will often be on, like a communication HME sort of headset, where I can, I'm not like tilt up or anything. I'm just more like after the take being like, oh, that's cool. Like, what if do you have room to push in 4 inches? Because it looks, I don't know, all those sort of notes that you'd normally come in and chat about.
But now it's happening over comms. Yeah. Wow. I didn't even think about that.
Oh, there's so many crazy COVID.
Yeah. Oh man, that could probably be its own VAS, just talking about all of that stuff down the line. But this is going to be 2 kind of questions combined a little bit. Elizabeth and Graham both want to kind of talk about, like, after film school, after college, like when you start working in the industry after you graduated, and this could be like after AFI probably as well, your USC straight to AFI, but what was the thing that surprised you most? What was it like breaking in and sort of finding your first kind of feature, your first big job after you graduated? And from that, what's the advice you would give students who are also young aspiring DPs graduating? Let's remove COVID from that, because that's also a whole separate thing. But
sure. Well, it's not easy. You graduate and suddenly, like, you're not like a cinematography student. You're just like some guy that is like looking up a mountain of a giant industry and wanting to get somewhere on it. And I don't think I was surprised, because when I was that teenager idolizing everybody in American cinematographer, I was very conscious that, like, especially cinematography, these were older people. These are people that had really either worked their way up camera, more and more working their way up sort of the gaffing side. But this was like 45, 50-year-old people that I knew I was willing to go long haul. And it's like, if it's going to take that, it's still worth it to me. So I wasn't like immediately crushed when in the first 5 years, almost nothing happened, I think if I had advice, so the first kind of thing that happened was my first feature, which was a really terrible, like horror movie that we made in the desert at night with no money. That's hard to make look good for sure. But I think the two things I'd say is like, if you don't want to be like long haul and wait for it a little bit, and that's not saying just wait and then like when you turn a certain age, you're gonna get it. You just have to put in a lot of work. Lucky for me, while I was shooting that horror film, like I was the happiest person ever. So like, I think every little notch you do, everything is the biggest thing you've ever done, probably, when you do it. And keeping that excitement up and feeling like, man, I get to tell people I did a feature now. Like, that's huge. That's huge. I've never done that before. And now, like, when someone is looking for a feature DP, I can be like, I shot a feature, I'm ready to shoot your feature. Like, notching every big thing that happens with you, really actually feeling the excitement and not like, I wish I was doing something better. You know, I think that was a lot of it. I always thought I was always really happy wherever I was, because I was like, I'm crushing it right now. And then in hindsight, I'm like, wow, I was like very optimistic. But it wasn't optimism. It was just knowing that it wasn't going to happen until I was, you know, someone good enough to hire. And I always thought I was. Like, I graduated, I'm like, now I'm good enough to hire. And it's like, I had a lot of personal growth to do, craft wise, everything. You know, you've got a lot of building to do, and the sooner you can do it, the I think maybe the faster the way up. But yeah, I don't know. I felt the same way on that feature that I probably did on some of these big TV shows, where I was just like, this is amazing. I'm doing what I love and I'm making money at it. I've made $50 a day on that. And I got one point and I get a check once in a while. Like $5 or something. But anyway, that's the thing, is just enjoy the ride and know it's going to take a little while, and always look for opportunities, obviously, but don't get discouraged. And there's going to be times where you're like, what am I doing? I'm not making money and I'm going to quit. I've threatened that a lot. I wouldn't say a lot, but there's times you're just like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm chasing over the worst thing ever so I can make $150, or I'm like working like 14 hours gaffing somebody else's thing for, you know, very little money, barely enough to live off of. Like, it's there's no doubt that it's ugly out there for a while. It's hard. It's a competitive business. It's crazy. But you know, the people that stick it out, I think you'll end up doing something you love out of it.
Okay, we're gonna go. This is gonna get a little granular. A couple of things going on, question-wise. Peg B wants to know. So, are there specific tips that you have for contrasting skin tones and environments, like when you're putting people in these spaces? Because it seems like you're pretty attuned to that, like lighting these kinds of gradients and, you know, letting the backgrounds kind of fall off a little bit more. I mean, what are some like kind of specific tips you have for dealing with that?
That's a great question, and it's a great observation, because it is something I do very carefully cultivate. One of the first things you can do is choose a good location, and not like a beige walled, like all my film school films were in like a beige walled apartment that we all lived in. But I mean, it's very hard. Let's say, I mean, what's the difference between this and a beige wall? Not much. So it's hard to find that sort of depth there. So the first thing you can do is like find a place that the walls are a little dark. I'm always pushing for darker walls on the sets. Production designers are like, but that's not what it would be like in real life. I'm like, but trust me, like when I turn on lights, it's going to look like just a bright white wall, and it's going to be hard to see our characters against it, and they're not going to pop and all that stuff. So trying to find nuanced or darker walls helps. Controlling, like, you know, if you're going to do an overhead softbox, skirting it, using flags, like learning the art of gripping, what a key grip does, the decisions he's making. And a good one is offering you constantly like, see all that spill on the back wall? Always like keeping the light on the people and keeping it off the wall is like a big part of what we do. And then if we want to add a little nuance, maybe we'll glow up that dark wall from the bottom behind the couch or something so that it has this kind of feel that it's falling off. And then sort of balancing different skin tones is, there's a lot of different, there's just a variety of ways to approach it. But generally, I tend to light sort of the side people are looking. That tends to help all skin tones, no matter how much you're absorbing or reflecting. Blocking darker actors closer to the light, like if there's a two shot and, two different skin tones, being smart about where they are in relation to the light. Trying to find, ways to get light to people that are further from the light, no matter what the skin tone. So it's all this sort of balancing of just different techniques, but there's no real mystery to it. I feel like I light people all sort of the same, and the levels might change a little, or the control. If someone's really close to the light and very light, I might, knock them down with a flag and let the rest of the light fall further down the room. It's all this stuff that sort of just, you look at the monitor and you're like, is that person a little too light? And you just sort of work it a person at a time, and then, you've run out of time and you gotta go.
Is there, this is a totally random kind of nerd question, but are you one of those cinematographers that uses a light meter on set all the time? Or are you more like looking at false color on a monitor, or just looking at the calibrated monitor on its own? Is there
yeah, so I kind of came up at the transition from film to digital. And I, of course, was always using a light meter, but the greatest thing ever is that you can now just look at what it's going to look like. So that's the number one tool I have, is the calibrated monitor, and just being like, this is it. This is like what we're shooting right now. There's no mystery. I'm not going to be surprised in dailies. I obviously do need to control my exposures in some sort of, calibrated technical way. And I'm like a false color junkie. Like I make sure at DIT, I have two big monitors, and I also have two false colors on at all times there. I've got the irises on a remote. So as we turn a corner, I'm opening up, basing everything on exposure. So I'm actually constantly writing exposure. If someone like misses the light and end up a little dark, I can open them up. All that sort of stuff is happening while we're going. That said, I carry a meter because, if you're lighting a oneer that starts at one end of the house and ends up at the other, you're not going to have the Steadicam guy do it over and over while you light it and check your false color. So you just want to make sure you have a consistent, set a stop. It's going to be a 2 here. I'm getting a 2 here. This is low. Let's bring that up a little. So you can use it as sort of keeping things all together, and look at your first frame, your last frame, and then start rehearsing and tweaking from there. But that's kind of how I use a meter now. Going
off of that then, because if you're looking at the monitor so much, I mean, obviously like LUTs are super important. And Lisa asked this as kind of this is a pretty good follow-up question to this, but do you have a palette of preferred LUTs that you like to use when you're on set, like looks that you're baking in, to that? Or, I know Dear White People was kind of a unique situation regard.
Yeah.
But do you have a preferred LUTs that you're using?
We make one custom for every show. So sometimes I'll start with something that I know is going to be the basic, like sort of, curve, and then shift it color wise. However, I think the show will go. That's something we do at the test, is like try out some LUTs based on usually our final colorist. I'll kind of describe what I'm looking for. They'll send us a LUT. We'll shoot our hair and makeup tests. And then we'll go back and take that footage and tweak that LUT and put that into, the pipeline. I don't necessarily have preferred LUTs. And Dear White People was like, I was just told I couldn't have a DIT. We didn't have a final colorist when we started. So we actually just shot that 709 and created that whole sort of LUT look in post, just created it sort of on episode 1 as we got it in final color. So what we were looking at on set was quite a bit more crunchy, and which is great. It sort of made us expose very perfectly to protect our highlights and shadows when we actually had a ton of information in both.
Just like protecting the negative, essentially.
Yeah. I actually, sometimes I'll just, revert to that, just knowing if I can make 709 look good, it's like the world's your oyster.
And then like, what was that look that you kind of dialed in then? I mean, you like when you're talking about Dear White People specifically, it has a pretty specific kind of color scheme to it.
It's got Justin kind of wanted an Instagram kind of filter feel to it, which is interesting. Like, you know, one of those ones you swipe through. It's definitely a lot more nuanced than one of those, but it has a lot of lifted shadow levels. It's got some pulled down light levels, so it's actually got a sort of lower contrast vibe, but it's lit very contrasty. So it's kind of got a little bit of both of those. It's got a warmth in the highlights, and it tends to have a bit of a cyan in the shadows. So it's got this kind of, you know, warm versus cool in a sort of subtle way that you'll only, you know, it'll only hit when it's whatever, 85 IRE will start to get warmer, and, you know, very shadowy will start to get a little cooler. And then obviously we just sort of laid that, created that in the final color, and then sort of laid it shot to shot and tweaked it as needed to make everything match.
Copy that. Yeah, because that's something that I was like, I was really struck by that and the show just progressed to some degree in that too. But it's got kind of a almost smoky kind of vibe to it, like that Instagram filter. You know, it kind of feels like a faded picture at times, but it's got that deep kind of texture and saturation to it too. It's just, I don't know, that's interesting that's dialed in so much later on.
Yeah, they push it even further, and actually some interesting desaturation, I feel like, as it goes on a little too. Some more sort of like anyway, that's the other cool thing is like seasons are, you know, their own sort of long feature, but at the break of a season you have this opportunity now to say, well, this season's about something different, and we're going to take those initial ideas and push them. And I know they just wrapped the final season like last week, and it sounds very exciting. That's
I'm excited. This has been great, just like watching this first season and getting to kind of go into the next one now. But like, yeah, it's been really cool to kind of see all that unfold visually, like over the whole season. Okay, two more questions, and they're kind of both a little divergent here. So Kim wants to know, what is the biggest misconception about your job as a cinematographer?
I mean, it's a misunderstood job in general. I mean, how many times do you have to explain what it is to people? I'm not even positive my mom knows what it is. I know she likes the shows and stuff, but I think, you know, it's a hard thing to describe all the things you have access to. And that's actually, I mean, in terms of creative tools, but that's actually what's so great about it is like, you hope that people are feeling what you do, taking it in, and it feels right for the story. So they're not actually ever going to think like, oh, somebody had to light it that way, or this is like, you know, hopefully all these things like this lookbook and all these things we're doing, which is like a subjective interpretation of a character's mindset, couples with the, you know, performance, and is a little bit invisible, but is that sort of, you know, tapestry around the words like we were talking about, that is sort of felt but not outwardly noticed. Misconceptions, I mean, one common one is that like all cinematographers are operating all the time. I operated obviously a lot in the indie times, but as those films went on, I started to find a lot of value in working with an operator. And I really, sometimes like on Mrs. Fletcher, I don't know if you saw the finale of that, it gets real crazy, but it's all handheld, and like that I dove into, and like I really like getting in and doing handhelds because sort of the doc instinct side of me likes to kick in, but especially when it's two cameras, I love to just be able to see both and balance each other and be like, I think you can move in a little. Like there's stuff I can see by seeing both, that, you know, how they're going to cut and all that stuff. So I think people picture a DP behind a camera, and while I love it and sometimes miss it, so much of my job is, you know, the operators are just other collaborators, like a gaffer and a key grip and a dolly grip and a steady cam op, like all part of, you know, that that fabric, just more people to collaborate with and come up with ideas that are going to make it better.
Well, I think this actually might be a good kind of lead into the last question that KM is asking here, which is, because I think this is a little bit of a, maybe not a misconception, but something that we tend to think about as people ask us as cinematographers is when you're creating and visualizing a shot, how do you balance making something look super pretty
Yeah.
and moving the story forward, like a shot that is like the demo reel shot versus the shot that's, this needs to be what it is at this moment.
Yeah. You can get carried away in DP brain and start veering away from what's important. Your greatest asset is your collaboration with the director, has such a concept and vision for the tone that's appropriate and their interpretation of the story and their gut instincts, that hopefully those ideas don't get too far before they're like, hey, that doesn't feel right. The best case scenario is that you're creating, and this is what I'm always trying to do, is like create the best, beautiful is a kind of loaded word, but the most appropriate, good cinematography, meaning storytelling cinematography, totally right for, what might be right for a doc style, naturalistic thing is very different from like a very sculpted, formal thing. But I'm trying to connect this here.
No, I mean, I guess that this is something I've sort of thought about too, is like,
oh, I was going to say the best thing I'm always striving for is the shot that's reel worthy. That is the storytelling shot. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like if you can combine, interpret the perfect storytelling shot that's also very visually interesting and appropriate and good cinematography. And that doesn't always mean like the beautiful shot, but the best use of all the tools to tell the story and, do your job. That's the goal.
Well, it's also and that's the challenge, right? Is not just budgeting, but just the time. It's like, okay, we got 2 hours to shoot this entire scene that has 10 shots in it. Okay, well, I guess we're going to light it like this because that's the only way we're going to get all of those shots. And inevitably there's the compromising that starts to occur.
Oh, it's nonstop compromise. Yeah. There's so many ways to approach those situations, and you sort of have to weigh them in the story and be like, well, how important is this scene? Like, can it be done in fewer better shots? Or do we have to like have a ton of shots, but sort of light it in a way that we can turn around really easily? It's constantly strategy and trying to weigh the importance of any individual shot towards the story. There could be a scene that like, you have 2 scenes and you have 4 hours or whatever, and you decide one is so important that 3 of those hours are that scene and the other one is going to be done in a oneer because it's just this little moment that actually we need the time to really nail the other scene. So it's exactly what you're talking about. It's just budgeting. It's budgeting story out in some way and saying, what are we going to put all of our time and resources into, and what can we kind of do elegantly, but if it's not the most elaborate thing, still works.
Yeah. Well, that's it for the questions, and those are awesome questions. So
really
thank
good
you.
questions.
Thank you guys, all of you, for asking those questions. That's fantastic. And yeah, I feel like that's kind of a good place to wrap things up too. Any parting words of advice for the students who are kind of listening? Because obviously we don't have just cinematography students. We have screenwriting, producing students kind of out there right now. But what would you leave them with?
I think just think long term, build your endurance, work on, try to be self-reflexive and see what parts of your personality could, that improvement could help your craft. And then just practice by taking everything and being excited about whatever it is. It's you've chosen a very competitive and a very long haul sort of career, especially cinematography. I can speak to the most, of course. But you're here because you love it. And when you get to do it, it's like you never work a day in your life. It's that old saying that's like, when you do what you love, you never actually, I get to go make television, and it's great. So just stick with it, and think long term, because a lot of people are going to fall off along the way. Almost all of them, actually. So stick with it. You got to think long term, and there's going to be plenty of opportunities to fall off yourself and find something else that's probably more sane as a career. But get out there, keep crushing it.
No, we didn't pick this industry because we were sane, I suppose.
No, we're all here just because we're passionate, and that's what's going to drive you. Always tap back into that. If you lose the passion, it's just not worth it. There's so hours, obviously, the relationships, everything is harder by choosing a job in this biz.